Hello, everybody. This is Rev Sue Frederick, and I am so excited to have you here for another mystical conversation. I'm a Unity minister, a master numerologist, and the author of the Angel Up books. So let's have a mystical conversation today, the kind where we lose ourselves in the wonders of divine mysteries, share dreams from the other side, intuitive nudgings, and soul mission yearnings. Our guest today for this mystical conversation is someone who I consider to be a very dear friend. I love this soul so much. His name is Jacob Cooper. He's a licensed social worker, and his life was forever changed when he was 3 years old and had a profound near-death experience, which he's going to talk about today. It was a result of contracting pertussis, or as we know, whooping cough is another name for it. And he's going to tell you that story. It's an amazing story. But today, with his recollection of that NDE of knowing beyond any doubt that we exist beyond the veil and that we are divine beings, he does work. Helping people integrate psychology and spirituality, which is such an important thing to do. He holds a master's in social work and a licensed clinical social worker, a certified Reiki master, certified hypnotherapist, and also a soul regression therapist. Jacob synthesizes his grounded mental health background and his spiritual experiences to assist others in their own transformations. He has presented at the Edgar Cayce Association for Research and Enlightenment, the International Association of Near-Death Studies, the Forever Family Foundation, Helping Parents Heal Foundation, many spiritual centers, including Omega, and he has been a featured guest on CBS television, Coast to Coast AM, George Norrie, Ions Radio, Alison Dubois, the Dead Life podcast, Next Level Soul. And he's the best-selling author of Life After Breath, a memoir on his near-death experience, and the newest book, beautiful book, The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Beautiful Jacob, say hello.
Hello, Sue. Hello, Sue. Thank you so much. Who was that guy? He sounds a little interesting.
He's
I,
my
you know,
best friend, Jacob.
I don't know if you ever like write something or hear something about, when someone reads your bio, you're like, is that really me? Because our perception of who we are
Yes.
is so much different than, what we do in some ways,
Every
so.
time somebody reads my bio, I sit there going, wow, I'd like to know that person. Who is that?
Well, I guess that's what the purpose of this conversation is, and hopefully I'll be able to understand that person a little bit better too.
Well,
You
why
know,
don't you take us back to the 3-year-old little boy and share how that experience unfolded and where it has brought you to?
yeah. Well, to preface, Sue, this is my 32nd anniversary this month of my near-death experience. It happened in September, so we're going back memory lane down to
Oh, perfect.
32 years ago in September. So it just feels like just yesterday. Much like today when we're recording on September 11th, I was just in the sixth grade, and we all know where we were on that day if we were alive. And, I think that was the gift of my NDE was the combination of physical trauma as well as something that I was meant to remember after all these years. But for myself, as you mentioned before, in the short of it, I had pertussis, didn't know it at the time, went to a playground, climbed up on a ladder going onto a slide, and I want to take all the viewers with me. And I tried to breathe in air, nothing came out. I tried, I kept on trying. No matter what I do, there was nothing going on. And so I just felt my body shutting down one unit at a time. And I tried to hold on to dear life for all I could, but there was nothing I can do. And I just had to surrender to this vortex of energy that was carrying me, to this other realm. But then I was able to really see outside of my body what was happening, and I had just so much awareness of my body and all of its functionality without going to medical school. Bear in mind, 3 years chronological age. And then I just felt my brain literally deprived of oxygen, and I heard this tremendously loud crack within my brain. And once my brain cracked open, that's when I followed this vortex energy, crossed over, entered the tunnel, and it really ascended thousands of miles an hour, upwards and onwards to infinity, to euphoria. And, really that's when the euphoric elements of my NDE, unfolded, in which, as you mentioned before, I encountered two of my guardian angels, a male and female guide that were with me. I saw hundreds of angels floating right in front of my body that was on the ground, lifeless. I was able to remember previous lifetimes, aware of God, even the Christ consciousness, which we could get into. And most importantly, I had the optionality of deciding to stay versus stay on the other side versus stay in this life. And I was shown premonitions of the work that I would be doing in this life. And I said, as beautiful as being with my loved ones on the other side and all the angels, this unique window to bring heaven onto earth is much grander than heaven itself. And I decided to stay, due to being the embodiment of the service and the harbinger of good news to those who are meant to hear it, that we are more than our bodies, we go on. And so, that's a little bit of the short of my near-death experience, and hopefully we could get into it. But
Yeah.
I always believe that epiphanies by themselves don't necessarily change you. I more so believe what you learn with them and what you do with them and how you live your life really changes you. And that's really the task at hand with
Right.
this profound experience that I now have 32 years ago as of this month in September, you know.
Well, Jacob, then, as this beautiful little boy, how did you then decide, and how old were you when you decided you wanted to be a social worker? Like, was that vision clear to you the whole time from then on that you wanted to help people bring heaven to earth, or how did that unfold?
It's hard to pinpoint. I mean, certainly, I did come from intergenerations of humanitarians and of social workers within my family. At a young age, I was working, my father ran, services for those with developmental disabilities, special needs. And so while some of my other peers were sleeping in on Sundays, I was up at 7 or 8 volunteering for some of these, some of the segment of the population which were disenfranchised and outcasted. And we, understood in my family that community is only whole until everyone's incorporated. And so we took these kids to wrestling matches, to basketball games, we had activities, and that really reminded me of, who we are and why we're here. And it was really, I would say, the very symmetrical of what I learned at points in my life that was really identical to what I learned in my NDE. I was just a child in a playground, and that symbology and that messaging and that
Mm,
allegory of that universal representation of who we all are as just
mm.
children's in the eternal playground of God, here to be a brothers and sisters keeper. So I guess for myself, I felt a sense of debt of gratitude, for God and for Spirit for giving me that, that continuity of life and breath and reminding myself the sacredness of it. And I think when you touch something so special and so sacred, there's a point where that doesn't become a burden, but it becomes a blessing and a gift that you want to remind each and every person that they also have inside.
So, how does that infiltrate to your work today? Because I know you work with many different kinds of populations today, including doing soul regression therapy and doing, straight up therapy at your other work. How do you manage to bring that heavenly perspective to all these people? And thinking of the listener today who's struggling with our world, feeling their own depression, their own anxiety, their own fear. Bring heaven to earth for all of us, Jacob. Explain how it works.
This is very fresh. I had a very profound spiritual experience this past weekend I did a technique called holotropic breath work, which was developed by a psychiatrist in the 70s by the name of Dr. Stan Graff and his wife. You know, Stan is still around. And it was developed, I believe, at the Acelian Center in California. But essentially, this breath work allows people to get into what's called non-ordinary states of consciousness. You know, we call it the spirit channel. Ordinary is just, kind of the human channel. And it has a similar effect that people have when taking DMT or any hallucinogenics without the adversive side effects that potentially, those, chemicals can have. But when I was doing this, I got into a very deep state and I started channeling.
Wow.
And what I was channeling was I had my NDE for various different reasons, but part of it and part of why I do the work that I do is that I did suffer quite immensely after having this near-death experience, and that's included in my memoir. And why I did that is when you're able to experience such pain and suffering, you're called to try to prevent people to do that at all costs, and you experience that yourself as almost a sacrificial life. And I kept on saying Jesus wasn't the only one who went on a cross, like we all
Right.
do in our own life
That's
through
right.
coming into this life. And I kept on saying, and that was a part of this Christ consciousness that we come here, sometimes as sacrificial experiences so that we could understand and really represent the contrast of what we do not want to have to happen to ourselves and others.
Mhm.
And so I think for myself, experiencing all that I did post NDE allowed me the inspiration to really, I would say, be the God embodiment, which is merely just a brothers and sister keeper and those, someone who serves and elevates the people in front of them. That to me is the closest thing to heaven on earth. And again, this is a guy who crossed over and went to heaven. That's great. I could tell you firsthand that as beautiful as that was, there's nothing greater than bringing it down to here.
Yes.
It's the greatest experience. So I think that's why we're all here. It's like that background that you have, on your in this conversation. And that was also coming to me that we are all these brilliant lights in
Yes.
this dark night of the sky here to cast our lights. And if we
That's
stop getting dependent on everybody's light, we can recognize we have this light, we are the light, and we
right.
are born to shine
I
that light.
think there's never been a harder time on earth for people to remember no matter what happens outside of me, I have to focus on
Mhm.
bringing my light to it,
Right.
right?
Yeah, well, there's an association with what you experience and who you are. We experience darkness, but that doesn't mean that at our core, that is who we are. We may experience separation, and that came to me as well this past Sunday that we are the light, we are not the darkness, and we're here to remember that contrast and what we're supposed to do, with that light. Again, that epiphany of knowing that we're the light is one thing, and again, living out its purpose, that's a whole other thing. What we do with that light. With great power comes great responsibility, of course, as we know, though.
I love everything you're saying. I mean, the path of the healer is always first the path of pain, and
Yeah.
then coming through and saying, now I want to help everyone to not have to walk that journey
Yeah.
that I've walked. And when we look at the metaphor of the life of the Christ,
Hmm.
the story of Jesus, his message was, I give you one commandment more important than all the rest, to love one another.
Hmm.
And he walked through, of course, the crucifixion journey of suffering. I believe, and metaphysically interpreted to say, we are all the same. We walk through our own crucifixions,
Hmm.
but we're here to rise from that and
Hmm.
enlighten others with love and healing energy. That's certainly something you have brought to the
Hmm.
world, Jacob. It's so fun to know you and watch you keep adding sacred tools to your toolbox and helping more and more people. And what would you say to, we're filming this in September of
Hmm.
2025. Obviously, a lot of painful things are happening in the world right now. And as you and I have talked before in numerology, this is a 9 month of culmination in a 9 universal year. So everything we're trying to shift to the light is coming to the forefront right
Mhm.
now. And yet we have to not be distracted and pulled into the darkness
Mhm.
by that. What are your personal techniques or spiritual practices? I love that you did that breath therapy. I've done a similar thing and it's extraordinary. What are the everyday techniques and tools that you
Mhm.
encourage people to do?
That's a great question. I would say every person has their own joy and their own routes to getting to that joy. What is recommended for someone may not be prescribed for another, and that's the unique element, is we all connect to the same light, but there's different paths up to that mountain. And I would just say, know thyself. For some people, that joy is, I don't know, going out to town and having a good time. Great. For other people, it may be more in solitude or being in nature. But I would say, again, I always, emphasize this. If you want to be in alignment with spirit, you have to be enthused. You have to be enthusiastic. And in theos, really that Greek word from the inner divinity. And so when you're feeling that radiance of joy, that's tapping into the spirit channel, as I mentioned before,
Oh,
that
I love
non which should be ordinary states of consciousness, but they're labeled as non-ordinary. So again, there's many channels in life, and I think each person has to decide, you know, who's driving my car, what's driving my car, and what station am I tuning into as I'm driving this car?
that.
For a lot of people, they're really driven by so many things other than their intuition or their spirit. And once intuition and spirit and grace is in that driver's seat, wow, that becomes a much more pleasant ride. And as you say, you can't control the waves, but you sure can learn how to surf,
Yeah.
if you will. So to go from the road to the water there, but yeah, but land and water, right? So
I
yeah.
love what you're saying because the words that I always talk about are the frequency shift, that
Hmm.
even anybody's method of meditation or prayer,
Hmm.
whatever shifts our frequency into that higher level,
Hmm.
we could, the God channel, whatever we want to call it, that is what we all have to do on a daily basis because the world is so hard and heavy that if we just wake up and go about our ordinary human life, we're going to feel all of that heaviness right now because consciousness is shifting. It's so intense here right now.
Hmm.
Love, hate, light, dark, all just hugely interplaying here. But to find our light, to find our God self, our higher self, we have to each know what that technique is that's
Hmm.
going to help us shift that frequency. And, I talk to clients all the time who are grieving, and some of them will say, well, for me, if I go for a walk in nature, that shifts my frequency. And I go, awesome, and then other people will say, I have to watch something funny on TV and laugh, but whatever each of our things are that shift our frequency,
Hmm.
that is what we are required to do. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely, absolutely. And, I think also at times I do believe in Carl Jung and what he said, and many other, psychoanalysts and therapists have say that in many ways the way out is through. And that's also a part of the hero's journey, is that you go through some of that battle to find the growth and the peace. And so, it's also about honoring where our feet are at as well, and not just evading, pain. I always say suffering is optional, pain is a part of life, and
Yes,
to embrace it because there's a lot of meaning and growth that could happen through learning self-compassion.
right.
And so a lot of people want happiness, but I think more people need to lean into finding joy and meaning because
Yeah.
that to me is more substantial and longer lasting. Happiness could be very fleeting, you
I
know?
agree. And the thing is here, we all have to find our purpose. And I know that there are a lot of people who think, well, I don't have to have a purpose, I'm just here to enjoy myself. But the truth of the human journey is we each are going to hit our painful, our moment, our journey of
Mhm.
crucifixion, our journey of pain.
Right.
And so as we hit that, we have to have the tools, like you're saying, to be able to
Mhm.
walk through it because there are many things we have to walk through. Even
Mhm.
when we know they're coming and we know they're going to be hard, we
Mhm.
still have to walk through them. I'm also referring to, for example, getting cancer
Mhm.
unexpectedly a year ago or so, and knowing I had to walk through this journey of surgery and healing. And when we know that we have to walk through a painful journey, we have to then be able to feel it, heal, cry it out, go through
Mhm.
whatever we have to go through in that pain story. But at the same time, also be looking for the light in the situation.
Mhm.
And is that kind of what you help your clients do when they're going through their journeys?
Absolutely. I think the ego, and I had this message on Sunday because for me as of late, especially in the summer, pretty much all I want to do is lie on the beach and tan all day.
Yeah.
Like I'm cool with that. And I had this message that like, that's the ego. The ego's focused on the self. The soul is here to create a change and an impact and to make a difference. And so when you're living a soul-filled life, it's not all about just chilling on the beach and taking. It's about making that ripple effect
Mhm.
and really going out there and making a difference. And so I think it's a balance act where, yes, do embrace that self-care, but that isn't just a goal within itself just to do. That is there so that you could be of presence and be the light to other people. So we try, I think with a lot of people, if you're feeling miserable, go out and serve. You'll feel a lot happier and find people who might be a little less fortunate in this life, and then you could see, understand how much not only you're able to give to them, but how much they're also able to teach and to give to you as well.
Mhm.
And we're all just kind of mini gods in a way,
That's
and here to
right.
just create life where it's absent. And that's really that whole contrast of that light and the dark. We're here to create that light in the dark, and that's really where life continues. It's a generation, it's generative, it's not stagnant. It goes on and it recreates and reinvents itself.
So, I just want to ask you if you could a little bit explain to our listeners about the Bible story Jacob's Ladder and how you brought that into your book. I love
Right.
that story personally, but give us your interpretation of that story and how it applies to your experience.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of times we ask ourselves, out of every name, on the earth, why did I pick my name? And certainly Jacob is a common name within my own culture and religion, to say the least, and was named after some family members. But I just asked, why out of all those names? And to me, there's a certain vibration of a name that reveals some of your potential life paths. I believe. And even the name Jacob itself, which we'll get into, wasn't even the full potentiality of that name. That name was actually changed to another name within a certain point of time when Jacob went on his own hero's journey, if you will. But Jacob essentially was a biblical character, one of the patriarchs in, the Christian Judeo religion. And, Jacob in the book of Genesis had a covenant given to him from his father and his brother Esau got very vengeful and jealous and started chasing Jacob. And Jacob ran from the home and tried to flee for his life. And he went on a pillar of rocks, which, as I say, is never chiropractically sound or recommended. Well, I think they would like that or give them good business, but not for your own well-being. And so Jacob had this dream when literally life and death was going in front of his eyes, and his brother was trying to take away the covenant and attack him and potentially kill him. And Jacob saw, the angels going up and down and ascending the ladder in his dream. And he saw this ladder and different rungs on the ladder, and he saw angels going up from the heavens down to the earth. And Jacob eventually wrestled with, I guess it was some of his own inner demons and stuff like that, and his name changed to Israel. So with Jacob, the allegory, the reasoning was, is I had my experience in a ladder in
On
a
a ladder.
playground,
I know. I think that's
and
so amazing.
and so to me, it really does speak to what I saw in my NDE, where right in front of me, from the deeper ethers to this reality. angels walk among us. They're all around us, slightly overlaying this earth reality. They're not millions of miles away. And when I saw these countless angels beyond my own guardian angels right in front of me, I saw so clearly that they are all right here, just a little tiny little dial. And a lot of times when people get into altered states of consciousness, they're also able to see, and some would call that mediumistic experience or, like yourself, angel communicators, but it's just really changing, the vibrations of your brain to get your brain into a lower vibratory rate so that you're able to really, the quieter to become, the more you can see, as they say. But they're all around us. We just have our blinders on, and that's okay. But it doesn't mean that just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. It
Yeah.
just means we have to use a different gear of perception to see it. But that's really, to me, Jacob's ladder really stands and embodies so much. But to me, it embodies evolution. It
Yeah.
embodies ascension. It embodies the groundedness that, yes, we are all Jacob's ladder. We all have our feet planted on this earth as a human body, and yet we all have this brilliant spirit where we come from. And we're bringing this beautiful spirit down from the rungs of the ladder, from heaven down to this earth. And then eventually we return and we ascend back to the source,
Oh
you
my
know.
God, you made my day. That is just beautiful. Love that so much, Jacob. And yes, you are the perfect representation having your NDE on a ladder. And
Right.
your name is Jacob, and you're talking about the angels. It's just beautiful. Well, I hope everyone gets your book, Jacob's Ladder. And where can they find your books?
Yeah, Jacob's Ladder and Life After Breath, they're both, available on Amazon. And you could also find me at some of my upcoming events if you're in the area,
Mhm.
including the Omega Institute, where I'm going to be with our mutual colleagues, Mark Anthony and Karen Noe,
Uh,
amongst a couple other folks. And this is going to be a beautiful, just kind of afterlife weekend, and looking forward to that. And hopefully a couple other things coming down the road in 2026
and so what
that
is
I
your
got a good feeling.
website where people can go to find you?
Yeah, if anyone's interested in finding me, you could go on jacoblcooper.com. You could find me on Instagram, Jacob Cooper LCSW. I also have a YouTube channel called The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, which Reverend Sue has been on twice, and hopefully we'll get,
And you've
gotta
been
get
on
on
my
Bert.
mystical
Right,
conversations
right,
twice.
right. Yeah.
Oh,
And
Jacob, you're like a brother from another mother. I love you.
we love you too, Sue. And I think it's very important for that's a part of the Christ consciousness too, that as Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven in me is in you too. And that's my hope when people hear, potentially my illustration or others, that they don't get attached to me, that they get attached to what they always have had inside. A lot of people ask me in interviews, they say, "Hey, Jacob, how do you want to be remembered?" And I say, I don't really care how I'm remembered. My bigger focus is that people remember who they are
Yeah,
and remember where they come from. And if I could do that, that's the ultimate gift. Because all of spirituality,
yeah,
to me, is a lot of recollection.
yeah, right.
It's hearing all these things and remembering, oh, I'm more than this body. And it's really about taking away of that, a lot of that amnesia that we could have in the human experience and
And what's
remembering
so
that
great
part.
about what you're saying is that all of us have different voices and stories that resonate with different people, you know?
Mhm,
So as each person finds whoever's story and voice resonates with them,
mhm,
the person giving the story is not the important part. It's those people finding, I understand now. I am part of the God light, you know. However, they get to that message through you, through me, through a million other teachers, it doesn't matter the venue. What
mhm.
matters is people taking that message to heart. And on that note, I want to thank you so much for coming back to have this heartfelt conversation with me. And I'm Sue Frederick. This is a mystical conversation with the beautiful Jacob Cooper. And you can find more information about this podcast on my website, suefrederick.com and mindbodyspiritfm.com. Thank you, sweet Jacob. Love you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you.